Hello, I'm Hans Klugston. I'm an attorney in Arizona and Alaska. I live mainly in Arizona, Prescott, Arizona. I help folks answer legal questions. Although not all tough problems have purely legal solutions, often consideration of the legal issues can help think through some of those tough problems. One of the tough problems confronting the country, or maybe not confronting in the sense of the pandemic itself, but during the pandemic, are what to do about refunds of deposits and who bears the risk of loss of those deposits. Let's start with just a little bit of strict law, law school law. That we'll start with a contract. Let's take an example of you put money down on somebody to remodel your home or build you a deck or those sorts of things. Um, that's going to be governed primarily by contract law. Sometimes it can get into tort law if it was not done correctly. But let's talk about a contract. And what is a contract? A contract consists of an offer and acceptance. So say that a contractor says, I'll build you a deck for $100. And you pay him the $100, and then that's offer and acceptance. That exchange of the offer and acceptance, when that's completed, that's what we call a consideration. It's the bargain for exchange. So it's I pay $100 and someone does the work for $100 to build that deck. Now that bargain for exchange, of course, can have other terms to it. Like I'll build your deck if you put on deposit with me $100 and if you give me 3 weeks to do it and you pick out the correct color you want your deck painted. So those terms of the contract are what takes up so much in a written contract of what's there. Now, we don't always use written contracts, and even sometimes when we do use written contracts, they don't consider all the possibilities. One of the possibilities that a number of contracts aren't going to consider, maybe they're not in writing at all, or maybe if they are in writing, they don't consider it greatly, is what we call the risk of loss. Let's say that during that 3 weeks that, say I'm the contractor or subcontractor, I'm building the deck in that 3-week period that I have it about halfway done, and a windstorm comes by and destroys all that work. Is it me as the subcontractor who's responsible for covering the cost of redoing all that work? Or is it me or the homeowner who has to pay for that additional work and additional supplies? What's the risk of loss in that? And you can imagine it could be either party or shared parties or not mentioned. A lot of times it's not really mentioned, the risk of loss in kind of our normal transactions, because we don't really consider that we're going to have much risk of loss during that period. Now, if you're buying a business, often that's a very important clause of what happens if something happens to the business, a fire, et cetera, that really destroys the ability of the business that you're buying to continue to function before you've completed it yourself. So contracts can have pretty substantial and important transfer of risk or assigning the risk of loss. And mainly what a contract is it gives certainty and it tells us how to handle those sorts of issues. Well, that's the general rule. But let's say that I put down $10,000 for a contractor, a reputable contractor, as most of them are, to build a house. I give them that $10,000, and then right now, because of the stay-at-home order, though I think construction trades in Arizona are considered essential and probably could go ahead, but you understand what I'm saying here, is that I give $10,000 and for some reason the general contractor can't do it. And then let's say he went ahead and had purchased some supplies or taken some of my $10,000 and put $5,000 on supplies with some sort of materials provider, lumber provider. And so let's say that lumber provider goes out of business during the pandemic. Even if they are essential, they just can't stay in business and they run out of money and they go bankrupt. Well, is the contractor responsible for that $5,000 that was spent on materials? Or am I out that money? And was the contractor just transferring the $5,000 on my behalf to the material supplier? So who has to take that risk? Now, someday maybe there might be, after bankruptcy or emerging from bankruptcy or liquidation of the lumber supplier, maybe there would be a way to recoup that $5,000, but it's certainly not clear now. And everyone's strapped for cash, according to the news these days, because of unemployment and the economic downturn. But have you considered that kind of risk of loss? Who gets that money back? Well, there are no easy answers. You start with that, probably that risk of loss, but there are even more difficult situations. For example, I have had a couple events that I have intended to go to in the coming months at venues that I wish to support, and people performing, or mainly performing at those events. I want to see and I want to support that. So I've been asked to reschedule those in the hopes that the performer will reschedule someday, but that's not a guarantee, of course, and it's not a guarantee that I could reschedule for something in the fall either, that I won't have time, or something may happen to me, or the venue itself may go bankrupt, just like the material supplier that we were talking about in the first example. In which case, if the venue goes bankrupt, how will I get a refund then? If they're bankrupt, I'll have to stand in line generally in the bankruptcy court, which probably would not pay me back. So there's a push that I want to support these entertainers and these venues, but at the same time, I don't want to be out of luck left holding the bag if they can't, if for whatever reason, reschedule these at a time that I can attend, and if they no longer have funds. And you can imagine even more difficult things when you're talking about travel, though airline tickets we seem to be working our way through there, though I hear rumors of lawsuits in the travel industry about refunds, maybe not in U.S. airlines, but flying international, and different rules apply. So this is a common problem that the people of this country are facing, is who bears the risk of loss of the deposits if it cannot be performed. Now, of course, generally you want to reach a negotiated solution with whomever you have a deposit with, or if you're the business owner, with people who have put deposits with you. But you want to protect those funds. Everybody does. And people aren't being mean or cheap, or to express their concerns that they need these deposits to be able to emerge on the other side of this pandemic. At the same time, people aren't being mean or cheap, etc., if they need their refunds back, because if they had known that they were going to suffer the economic losses that they have during the pandemic, they never would have made these purchases. So there are just a lot of legal issues that can arise, even in a very simple matter about refunds and the risk of loss during the pandemic. I just wanted to put this out there to say, essentially, it is a complex issue. Don't drive yourself crazy thinking in circles about it. Pay attention and just recognize that there are these competing concerns from the businesses who would like to retain those deposits, and also the consumers who may need those funds back. And probably honest communication and working together is the best way to do that. And again, I'm Hans Klugston. Thank you for watching.